Follow the Leader by Jason Brannon. Narrated by Luke Welland. I like to walk late at night. It's a good way to unwind after a stressful day of listening to the whispering machines, to the singing cogs, to the screaming gears turning and locking into place. Evidently, lots of people like to walk at night too, although I didn't realize it until my insomnia forced me out into the streets of my town at a little past 1 in the morning. Walking helps give my life structure, and that's exactly what I need. There's something very routine and methodical about putting one foot in front of the other. It's almost mechanical how all the parts function together. The heart beating, legs pumping, lungs bellowing air. Strange that I should liken the body to a machine after all I've been through. Old habits die hard, I guess. The machines hadn't spoken to me in a little over 6 months, and I was beginning to think that I was in control of my life again. I had a good job building furniture. I paid my bills on time. I did all my own grocery shopping. I had even gone on a date or two with women who knew nothing of my past. 6 months ago, while listening to the chit-chat of microchips, I would have never dreamed that this sort of life was possible. Of course, to most people, this sort of life isn't that extraordinary. I might have agreed with them had I not spent most of my days and nights with plugs in my ears, trying to block out the whirring, binary voices of the machines around me that were continually urging me to do unspeakable things. I'm certain that the nocturnal strolls around the block helped insulate me against the noise. Being outside in the open air was like an inoculation against the hum of microwaves, the buzz of free-flowing electricity, and the screech of unoiled mechanisms. That Tuesday, I needed all the help I could get. My head was filled to overflowing with harsh sounds, whispers, and the chuffing of ungreased pistons. After finishing my walk and clearing my head of all the electronic debris that had collected there during the day, I took a quick shower, jumped into my pajamas, and readied myself for bed. I sighed, pushed back the covers, and got out of bed moments after getting in it. I read for a few minutes, drank warm milk, put my earplugs in so I could watch an infomercial on TV without fear of suggestion, and even considered counting sheep. But nothing helped. I decided to go for another walk. This time, when I ventured out of the house, the temperature had dropped a little. The moon had shifted in the sky, and the heavens lit up at irregular intervals with brief bursts of lightning. Oblivious to everything but the night around him, a man stood on the corner, tapping his foot impatiently like he was waiting for someone. Dressed entirely in black, the man stared at me with equal parts amusement and curiosity. He only stood there a few seconds before motioning for me to follow him. Then he turned and walked away. I think the gears inside my watch were making sounds not unlike human speech, nudging me to break free of my straitjacket routine and follow the man. As I had done so many times before, I listened to the voices and pursued him. My curiosity grew as I saw other people standing on the street corners and then subsequently falling in behind us like Hamlin rats. By the time we had gone a few blocks, there were 7 of us. The rest of the group eyed me carefully but said nothing. No doubt they were wondering who I was. I had the same question about them. I started to speak when the man I was following held a finger up to his lips in a quieting gesture. "Shh, not now," he whispered. "We'll talk later." Our destination was a 2-story Victorian that had seen better days, but still somehow managed to stand despite a cracked foundation and rampant evidence of termites. No lights burned in any of the windows, and it was logical to assume that everyone inside was asleep. Our guide motioned for us to follow him as he tiptoed up to the porch. I felt myself slipping into old habits. This is how it had started before, with the clocks commanding me, the radios urging me onward, the satellites in space spurning me into action. Our leader tried the front door only to find it locked. He wasted no time pulling out a set of picks. Within seconds, the lock was sprung, and the door swung open with a quiet hiss. I entered the house, feeling like some sleeping part of me was about to wake up. Imagine the confusion on my face when I saw the leader reach into one of his pockets and pull out a handful of those unfurling noisemakers that are so popular with kids at birthday parties. This derailed every expectation I had up to this point. I had anticipated guns or knives or shackles, not children's toys. Somehow, all 7 of us managed to creep up to the second floor without waking anyone. Our leader smiled and pointed to one of the rooms. The door was closed but not locked. Inside, an elderly man and woman slept peacefully while a ceiling fan turned in lazy circles. The digital clock beside their bed read 1:16 in bright bold letters. I think it said something to me, but I was too busy trying to understand what was going on to listen. On 3, our leader whispered as he placed the party whistle up to his lips. He performed the countdown with his fingers, holding up 1, then 2, and finally 3. We all blew on our noisemakers at the same time. The old man and woman jumped up, confused, frightened, and disoriented. The woman screamed as she saw all of us in her bedroom. The man, more angry than shocked, fumbled around in a drawer, eventually producing a chrome-handled pistol that gleamed in the moonlight. The sight of that gun was all we needed to send us running down the stairs and out of the house. The old man fired at us a couple of times from his front porch, but missed. Once safely on the street again, everyone went their separate directions, except for me and my guide. He followed me long enough to explain what I had gotten myself involved in. We do this every night. A different one of us is always in charge. We never know what kind of situation we'll find ourselves in. It's always up to the leader, and that's the fun of it. None of us know each other either, and that's probably for the best. Come out tomorrow at the same time, and this time wear black. Nobody comes with you either. I didn't get a chance to ask any questions as the leader of the group ran away into the shadows, leaving me with a sense of exhilaration I hadn't felt in many, many years. It was exactly the sort of feeling I had gotten when the machine spoke to me for the first time. I spent the next day thinking about what the following night might hold, and debating on whether or not I should go out again. Of course, there was no real possibility that I would back out. The next evening, I set my alarm to wake me at 10 minutes until 1. The clock screamed at me just as intended, promising me a night of exhilaration, and I woke up feeling invigorated. The group was out in force. This time, we were led by a buxom redhead, dressed in dark coveralls. I definitely hadn't seen her the night before. I would have remembered. I had taken the advice and dressed in black. There were 9 of us that evening, and at least half of the walkers were new, or new to me. I wondered how many people in this town were privy to these late-night jaunts, and how many of these faces I would recognize at the bank, or the grocery store, or the gas station. We went in a completely different direction from the night before, making twists and turns through the streets that were unfamiliar to me. I didn't start to get anxious and jittery until we left the sanctuary of sidewalks and brightly lit streets and headed down a winding trail that branched off through a patch of dark woods. I paused for a moment when we reached the cemetery. Shovels were lined up single file against the wrought iron gates. Moonlight trickled through the trees. "Grab a shovel," our leader said. It was a command I had heard before when all the machines in my house decided to put in their 2 cents worth. Of course, that was long before the blood and the screaming and the jail time. Our leader threw her shovel over the gate and scaled it with the agility of a cat. We followed suit and marched single file through the labyrinth of graves. We were nearly at the back of the cemetery when our leader abruptly stopped and plunged her shovel into the soft earth covering someone named Maggie Lynn, devoted mother. Nobody else seemed to give a second thought to what we were doing. They all dug with reckless abandon, flinging dirt aside and keeping their attention focused on the job at hand. I couldn't help looking over my shoulder every now and then, out of fear that the police would step out of nowhere and cuff us all. I guess I was just paranoid. People who hear voices usually are. With 9 of us digging, it didn't take very long to reach the coffin. I knew we weren't going to just stop with unearthing the casket. We were going to open it. Strangely, it felt like I had gone back in time. The body had been interred for quite a while, long enough, in fact, to make the exhumation more pleasant than I would have expected. The corpse wasn't icky and wet like I thought it would be. Rather, it was dried, withered, and shrunken like a mummy in a floral print dress. "Everybody, take a souvenir," the redhead instructed. The deceased had obviously been a lover of jewelry and had a ring for each finger. One for each of us. The redhead, however, wasn't content with a tarnished trinket. Although I didn't see what she took, I heard something crack that sounded like a stick being snapped in half. I wanted to do as our leader had done, but I was afraid that taking such a gruesome souvenir might be the very thing that pushed me back into a world of savagery and madness. In the end, I settled for a ring like everybody else. That night, I slept with it under my pillow. I was elected to be the leader the next night, and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. It was so much easier to be a follower. Leading took work and planning. To make matters more complicated, I couldn't blame any of the voices on the machines anymore. The machines weren't the ones speaking to me. In fact, I was certain they never had. The voices were all mine. I called in sick at my job the following day and spent the afternoon wondering what kind of excursion I could devise. The night's festivities needed to be exciting, a little bit dangerous, and quite possibly illegal. After spending several hours thinking, I came up with just the thing. Or rather, the voices came up with it and I listened to them. Ever since that first walk, I had wondered what possessed these people to follow their leader without regard for any sense of morality or legality. But the deeper I delved, the more I realized that this entire game was built on trust. That was what made it exciting. The not knowing. To put their fate into the hands of someone they didn't even know was their form of exhilaration, of recreation. It was their way of getting high. These were the sorts of people who thrived on jumping out of airplanes, of bungee jumping, of eating rare and exotic foods, of getting in the car and driving with no clear destination in mind. These were thrill seekers, searching for that new rush, and tonight they were expecting me to provide that. No one questioned me as we trudged along the highway that wound up to the cliff's peak. Most of them had been there in the past when making out with old lovers in the backseat of a car. The cliff was deserted when we reached the top, but it was obvious from the looks on everyone's faces that they were familiar with the place. No one questioned me as I handed out the blindfolds. "Put these on," I told them. "What I want everyone to do is simple," I said. "This little nighttime organization is built on trust and the possibility of a cheap thrill. It's also based on following the leader. I want to see just how far you'll take it. Basically, I want everyone to keep your blindfolds on and follow the sound of my voice." There was a bit of murmuring, but everyone participated. I led them in circles at first, winding in and out of the long rows of wild brush that flanked either side of the cliff. Once I was sure no one knew exactly where they were in relation to the cliff face, I chose a spot on an outcropping of rock and beckoned the group to me. Like lemmings, they followed, and like nighttime stars, they fell. Not one of them screamed. They lay there at the bottom like that for a very long time. When I was sure none of them were still alive, I headed back home, feeling a little like Tom Jones. These people had gone to their deaths because of something I told them to do. I felt like a god. I went home and went to sleep immediately. I didn't dream. I didn't toss and turn. In fact, I slept better than I have in quite a while. I was still drunk on power then. I woke up refreshed and invigorated and looking forward to the night's festivities. The new leader might ask me to walk blindly off the edge of a cliff to my death. That was what made this so exciting, and what made me tingle every time I thought of the myriad possibilities. Whatever the case, I would follow willingly and do as I was told. I was prepared for anything now. I couldn't wait until it was my turn to be leader again. Neither could the voices.